Hello there, welcome to HFY Quantum Pro. Here, helping one another makes the universe smarter. So, what we are waiting for? Let's begin our story.
Nobody ever stayed long at Way Station Halonine. It was the kind of place where ships stopped only because they had to, a rusted refueling hub sitting on the edge of nowhere, caught between Shikari hunting territory and the neutral trade lanes. The lights flickered. The walls smelled like engine grease and old metal. The food was terrible, but it had fuel, and it had a repair bay, and sometimes that was enough. Danny Reeves guided the drifter into docking Clamp 7 with the lazy confidence of a man who had done it 1,000 times before. The ship groaned as the clamps locked into place. Behind him, Bina Okafor was already pulling up the damage report on her screen, her lips pressed into a thin line. Hull fracture on the port side is getting worse, she said. We patch it here, or we do not make it to Garant Station. Danny leaned back in his seat and stretched. Then we patch it here. Danny, yeah. Look outside. He looked. Through the viewport, the docking ring was almost empty. A dozen berths that should have been full of trade ships and fuel barges were vacant. The few ships still connected were powering up their engines, preparing to leave in a hurry. A small Pelani shuttle was already pulling away, its thrusters firing hard like it could not get out fast enough. That is not normal, Venus said. Danny shrugged. Could be anything. Bad food, broken recyclers, a trade dispute. Or it could be something that eats people. He smiled at her. Let's go find out. The station's interior was worse than the outside. Half the corridor lights were dead. The main concourse, which should have been packed with traders and travelers, had maybe a dozen beings scattered across it. Most of them were hunched over their tables, eating fast, eyes darting toward the exits. The air had that particular tension Danny recognized from his years in search and rescue back on Earth. It was the feeling of a place where something bad had already happened and something worse was coming. He found the docking registry office near Bay 3. Behind the counter sat a Pelani named Olu, a small creature with soft gray fur, long ears, and three-fingered hands that would not stop trembling. His eyes were enormous and wet, the kind of eyes evolution designed for spotting danger from very far away. Human, Olu said, his voice barely above a whisper. You should not be here. Need a whole patch, Danny said. 10 hours, maybe 12. Olu stared at him like he had just asked to take a nap inside a reactor core. You do not understand. The Shikari are here. A hunting party. They arrived 2 cycles ago. Danny had heard of the Shikari. Most spacers had. They were apex predators from a high-gravity world, 7 feet tall, covered in black scales, built like nightmares given legs and teeth. They conquered worlds not for resources or territory but for sport. Hunting sentient beings was their culture, their religion, their entire reason for existing. Have they killed anyone? Danny asked. Not yet. They are selecting. They corner people. They terrorize them. They watch them break. Then they choose who to hunt. Olu's ears flattened against his skull. 3 Drenari traders were cornered yesterday. One of them will not stop screaming. Please, human, leave. Danny considered this for a moment. Then he said, I need the whole patch first. Can you point me to the repair bay? Olu looked at him with an expression that was equal parts horror and confusion. He gave Danny the directions without another word. Bina was waiting at the repair bay when Danny arrived. She had already heard from 2 other mechanics about the Shikari. Her arms were crossed, and her jaw was set in that particular way that meant she was about to say something Danny would not enjoy. We leave, she said. Right now. We fly slow. We nurse the hull. We make it to Garen. The fracture will blow out before we hit the halfway point, and you know it. Better than being hunted by something with 4 eyes and claws the size of my hand. Bina. We patch the hull. We leave in 10 hours. Nothing is going to happen. She stared at him for a long time. Then she turned and started pulling tools from the rack. If something eats you, I am not writing the report. Danny smiled and went to get the sealant compound from the supply room. He walked through the main concourse again, moving at his usual easy pace, hands in his jacket pockets. A hydraulic line burst somewhere overhead with a sharp bang that echoed through the entire level. Every alien in the concourse flinched. A Pelani dove under a table. A A pair of Drenari scrambled for the nearest corridor. Danny did not flinch. He glanced up at the ceiling, noted the steam venting from the burst line, decided it was not dangerous, and kept walking. From afar into the concourse, hidden in the shadow of a support column, for amber eyes watched him. Riss had been observing the station's visitors for 2 days now. She had already selected and released 3 targets, all of them satisfying their fear, but ultimately boring. They ran. They begged. They collapsed. The same thing every time, on every station, on every world. The thrill of the hunt had started to feel hollow, like eating food with no taste. But this one, this human, he moved differently. His body was relaxed. His eyes were open and aware, but not afraid. When the hydraulic line had exploded above him, every other creature in the room had reacted with pure survival instinct. The human had not even blinked. Riss felt her neck ridges rise slowly. Her claws extended half an inch from their sheaths. Something old and deep in her hunter's brain whispered a single word. Interesting. She chose him. The common area of Way Station Howland 9 was not designed for comfort. It was a wide room with metal tables bolted to the floor, a food dispenser that produced the same gray broth regardless of which button you pressed, and lighting that made everything look slightly sick. But it was the only place on the station where you could sit down and eat without standing in a corridor, so Danny took what he could get. He sat alone at a corner table, spooning the broth into his mouth and trying to convince himself it tasted like chicken. It did not taste like chicken. It did not taste like anything. But it was warm, and after 6 hours of whole work, warm was enough. The room had maybe 10 other beings in it. A cluster of Drenari traders sat near the exit, eating in nervous silence. 2 Pelani service workers were cleaning tables on the far side, moving quickly, keeping their heads down. A lone vet-hairy merchant sat in the opposite corner, his 6 legs folded beneath him, his meal untouched. Then the room changed. It happened fast. Danny felt it before he saw it. The air shifted. Every alien in the room stopped moving at the same instant, like someone had pressed a pause button on the entire space. The Drenari traders went rigid. The Pelani workers froze mid-step. The vet-hairy merchant pulled all 6 legs tight against his body and made himself as small as possible. Danny looked up. She stood in the entrance of the common area, 7 feet tall, black scales that absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. 4 amber eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a face that was built for one purpose. A long, muscular tail curled behind her, the tip twitching slowly. Her claws were fully extended, each one as long as a human finger, curved like hooks. Riss stepped into the room, and the temperature seemed to drop. She moved with the fluid, rolling gait of something that had never needed to hurry, because nothing had ever been fast enough to escape her. Her neck ridges flared wide, revealing the bright red skin beneath, a threat display that was hardwired into the survival instincts of every species in the room. A low growl rolled out her chest. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It vibrated through the floor, through the tables, through the bones of every living thing in the room. It was the sound of something at the very top of the food chain announcing itself. The Drenari bolted. All 4 of them scrambled over each other, trying to reach the exit, their clawed feet scraping against the metal floor. The Pelani workers dropped their cleaning tools and ran. The vet-hairy merchant made a high-pitched keening sound and scuttled sideways out of the room on all 6 legs, knocking over 2 tables in the process. In 3 seconds, the common area was empty. Except for Danny. He was still sitting at his table. His spoon was still in his hand. He looked up at the 7-foot predator standing 15 feet away from him, her claws out, her growl still vibrating through the room, her 4 amber eyes locked onto him with the focused intensity of a creature that had hunted sentient beings across a dozen worlds. Danny smiled. It was not a brave smile or a crazy smile or a smile designed to hide fear. It was the easy, natural smile of a man who had just noticed someone walk into the room and decided to be friendly about it. "Hey," he said. Riss stopped. Her growl faded. Her neck ridges stayed flared, but her head tilted slightly to the side, the way a predator tilts its head when something unexpected enters its field of vision. She spoke in a voice that sounded like gravel being crushed. I am Riss of the Shikari Dominion. I have selected you. You will be hunted through this station. Your fear will honor me. Your death, if it comes, will bring me glory. It was the formal declaration, the ritual that began every hunt. Danny had never heard it before, but he understood the weight of it. Every word was designed to trigger panic in the target, to make them run so the chase could begin. Danny looked at her for a moment. Then he gestured to the empty chair across from him. You want to sit down? The broth is not great, but it is warm. Riss did not move. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, top to bottom, which Danny would later learn was a sign of deep confusion in Shikari body language. She had performed this ritual hundreds of times. Prey screamed. Prey begged. Prey soiled themselves. Prey tried to fight. Prey ran. No prey had ever offered her soup. She stood there for a long, silent moment. Then she turned and walked out of the common area without a word. Her tail knocked over a chair on the way out, and Danny got the impression she had not meant to do that. He went back to his broth. 20 minutes later, Olu appeared at his table, shaking so badly that his fur was standing on end. The little Pelani looked like he had been crying. You are insane, Olu said. You are completely insane. She declared the hunt on you. Do you understand what that means? She said she was going to hunt me through the station. Yes, and beings die in that hunt. The Shikari do not stop. Once you're selected, it does not end until you break or they get bored, and they do not get bored. Danny nodded slowly. I appreciate you telling me that, Olu. I really do. Then you will leave? No, Hull is not patched yet. Olu sat down across from him and put his head in his 3-fingered hands. The human species is defective, he whispered. Danny laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine and easy, and it echoed through the empty common area like something that did not belong there, but had decided to stay anyway. On the Shikari cruiser Fong of Silence, Riz stood before a screen showing Commander Drea's face. Drea was older, her scales faded to dark gray, her eyes sharp and cold. The human did not react, Riz said. Impossible. He smiled at me. He offered me food. Drea was quiet for a moment. Then she said, proceed with the hunt. But observe first. I want to know what this creature is before we break it. Riz cut the connection and stood alone in the dark of the communications room. She kept thinking about that smile. It had not been a threat or a bluff. It had been real. And for the first time in her life, Riz did not know what to do with something real. The maintenance corridors beneath Way Station Howland, 9 were a maze. Pipes ran along the ceiling in thick bundles, dripping condensation that pooled on the metal floor in dark puddles. The lighting down here was even worse than above, every third panel dead or buzzing with a sickly yellow flicker. The air was damp and carried the smell of old coolant and rust. Danny moved through the corridors with a parts list on his tablet and a bag slung over one shoulder. The repair bay above did not stock half of what he needed for the hull patch, but the maintenance level had storage rooms full of salvage components. Bina had sent him down with strict instructions. Get the sealant rods, get the bonding mesh, and do not do anything stupid. He was working on 2 out of 3. The first light went out when he turned the corner past Junction 7. It did not flicker or fade. It simply died, plunging the corridor ahead into darkness. Danny stopped. He listened. The station hummed around him, the constant background noise of recyclers and pumps. But underneath that, something else. A faint clicking sound like claws tapping on metal. He kept walking. The second light went out behind him. Then the third. The darkness was closing in from both directions, leaving him in a shrinking island of dim yellow light. Most beings would have started running by now. The Shikari hunting technique was designed for exactly that response. Cut the lights, narrow the space, trigger the panic, herd the prey into a dead end where the kill would be easy. Danny did not run. He slowed down. He had spent 4 years in search and rescue on Earth before joining the cargo fleet. Mountain rescues, cave systems, disaster zones. He had crawled through collapsed buildings in total darkness with nothing but his hands and his training. He had pulled survivors out of flooded tunnels where the water was chest high and rising. Darkness was not his enemy. Darkness was just a condition you worked in. He shifted his attention to the air. Down here, the ventilation system pushed air through the corridors in predictable patterns. If a passage was open, you could feel the faint movement of air against your skin. If it was blocked, the air went still. Danny held up his hand and felt the current. The corridor to his left was still flowing. The one ahead was dead. Something was blocking it. He turned left. Behind him, in the darkness, Riss watched. She had cut the lighting controls from a maintenance panel and had positioned herself at the end of the forward corridor, blocking the passage with her body. It was a perfect ambush. The prey should have walked straight into her. Instead, the human had turned away. Not in panic, not in blind flight. He had paused, done something with his hand, and chosen the open path. As if he could see in the dark. As if he could feel where she was. Riss moved after him, silent on the balls of her clawed feet. Danny walked for another 3 minutes through the winding corridors. He found the storage room he was looking for and stepped inside, pulling sealant rods from a shelf and checking them against his list. While he worked, he listened. The clicking sound had stopped, but that did not mean anything. A predator that stopped making noise was more dangerous than one that did not. He finished collecting what he needed and stepped back into the corridor. Riss dropped from the ceiling. She landed 3 feet in front of him with a heavy impact that shook the floor plates. Her full height blocked the corridor wall to wall. Her claws were out. Her fangs were bared, each one as long as his thumb, sharp enough to puncture hull plating. Her 4 amber eyes blazed in the dim light. A deep, rumbling snarl poured from her throat, filling the narrow space with sound that Danny could feel in his chest. It was the perfect predator display. Millions of years of evolution had designed every part of it to do one thing: make the target freeze, then flee, then die. Danny stood still. He looked up into those 4 burning eyes. He felt his heart rate spike, felt the adrenaline hit his bloodstream, felt every ancient survival instinct in his body scream at him to run. He acknowledged all of it, and then he set it aside, the way he had learned to set aside fear in every collapsed building, in every flooded tunnel, in every rescue that had gone wrong. He smiled. "You are really good at this," he said. His voice was steady, conversational, like they were talking over that terrible broth again. Seriously, the lights, the corridors, the ceiling drop. That was professional. Riss's snarl faltered. "But I grew up on Earth," Danny continued. "We had things that hunted us for 200,000 years. Lions, tigers, bears, wolves, crocodiles. Things with teeth and claws that made yours look polite. We did not survive because we were stronger than them. We survived because we learned how to stay calm when everything inside us was screaming." He tapped the side of his head. "It is in here, in our bones. Fear is not something that controls us. It is something we use." Riss stared at him. Her snarl had died completely. Her claws were still out, but her arms had lowered slightly. Her tail, which should have been coiled tight for a strike, was hanging loose behind her. She was confused. Deeply, fundamentally confused. Her entire hunting framework was built on a simple equation: display threat, trigger fear, exploit fear. It worked on every species. Every single one. The Drenari ran. The Pelani collapsed. The Vethari tried to fight and failed. Fear was the universal constant of the galaxy. But this human stood in front of her with his bag of sealant rods and his easy smile, and the equation did not work. He was afraid. She could smell the chemical change in his body, the sharp spike of adrenaline. He was absolutely afraid, and he was smiling anyway. Something shifted inside Riss's brain. Not a thought, something deeper. Something in the ancient predator wiring that had guided her species for millennia. A signal she had never received before. It did not say danger. It did not say prey. It said something else entirely, something her mind did not have a word for. Wrong. This is wrong. This creature is not what you think it is. Riss stepped backward, then another step. Then she turned and disappeared into the darkness of the corridor without a sound. Danny stood alone in the flickering light. He let out a long, slow breath. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them and laughed quietly. "Yeah," he said to nobody. "That was terrifying." Then he picked up his bag and walked back to the repair bay. Riss stood in the communications room of the Fong of Silence and tried to explain to Commander Drea what had happened in the maintenance corridors. She was not doing a good job of it. He did not run, she said for the third time. Drea's image on the screen was perfectly still. The older Shikari had the kind of patience that came from decades of commanding hunters, the patience of someone who waited for the prey to make a mistake rather than chasing it. Her faded gray scales looked like old stone in the blue light of the screen. You performed a full corridor ambush with lighting control and a ceiling drop, Drea said. Standard isolation technique. And the human did not flee. No. Did he fight? No. Did he freeze? He stood still, but it was not freezing. Freezing is when the body locks up. This was different. He was in control of it. He chose to stand still. Drea leaned forward slightly. That is not possible. Every species has a fear response. It is biological. You cannot choose to override it. Riz thought about the way Danny had looked at her in that corridor. The steady eyes, the relaxed shoulders, the smile that should not have been there. And underneath it all, the unmistakable chemical scent of adrenaline flooding his system. He had been afraid. His body had been screaming at him to run, and he had simply refused. Humans can, Riz said. Drea was silent for a long moment. Then she made her decision. I am sending 3 more hunters to the station. Gal, Senna, and Tor. If one huntress cannot break this creature, a full pack will. You will lead them. Riz felt something twist in her stomach. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. She did not know what she had been about to say. She closed her mouth and nodded. Find out what he is, Drea said. Then finish the hunt. The screen went dark. Back on Way Station Howland 9, Danny climbed through the drifter's airlock and found Bina sitting in the cockpit with a wrench in one hand and murder in her eyes. I talked to Olu, she said. A 7-foot Shikari huntress declared a ritual hunt on you. She stalked you through the maintenance level. She dropped from the ceiling in front of you, and you smiled at her. The bra thing did not work the first time, so I thought I would try just a smile. Bina threw the wrench at him. He caught it. She was not actually trying to hit him. Probably. We are leaving, she said. Right now. The hull patch is 80% done. That is enough to limp to Garen if we keep the speed low. Danny sat down across from her and set the wrench on the console. Bina, listen to me. I do not think she's going to hurt me. She is a Shikari. Hurting things is literally what they do. I know, but I saw something in her eyes down in that corridor. Well, I did not run. When I just stood there and talked to her, something changed. She was not angry. She was not frustrated. She was confused. And confused is not the same as dangerous. Bina stared at him. You are betting your life on a look in her eyes. I have bet my life on worse. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Fine, but I'm keeping the engines warm. The second something goes wrong, we are gone. Hull fracture or not. Danny nodded. Then he went to find Olu. The little Pelani was hiding in a storage closet near the docking registry, wrapped in a thermal blanket and eating a ration bar with trembling hands. He nearly jumped out of his fur when Danny opened the door. Tell me about Shikari culture, Danny said, sitting down on a crate across from him. Olu blinked his enormous eyes. Why? Because I need to understand how they think. Olu chewed his ration bar slowly, thinking. Then he said, the Shikari see the galaxy through one framework. Everything is either predator or prey. That is it. There are no other categories. When they meet a new species, the first thing they do is determine which category it belongs to. If it runs, it is prey. If it fights, it is a predator, and they will either respect it or kill it. There is no middle ground. What happens if something does not run and does not fight? Olu's ears twitched. That does not happen. Every species does one or the other. It is biology. But what if it did happen? What would they do? The Pelani was quiet for a long time. His ration bar hung forgotten in his hand. I do not know, he said finally. I do not think they know either. You would be something outside their system, something they have no word for. And the Shikari do not like things they cannot name. Danny nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind. Not a plan to fight, not a plan to run. A plan to be something the Shikari had never encountered before. Something their entire predator framework could not process. Olu, he said, when a Shikari hunt, How do they coordinate? What is the pack structure? Olu told him. He explained how the pack moved, how they communicated through subvocal clicks, how the lead hunter directed the others to herd the prey into a kill zone. He explained how the pack's effectiveness depended entirely on the prey behaving predictably, running in the expected directions, panicking at the expected moments, making the expected mistakes. And if the prey does not do any of those things, Danny asked, then the pack falls apart. They're not trained for chaos. They're trained for fear. Danny stood up. He smiled, and for the first time, there was something sharp behind it. Not aggression, not cruelty, just the quiet focus of a man who had figured out the rules of a game he had not asked to play. Thank you, Olu. Danny, yeah, please do not die. You are the first person on this station who has been kind to me. Danny looked at the small, trembling Pelani wrapped in his blanket, hiding in a closet because the galaxy had taught him that hiding was the only way to survive. He reached out and put his hand gently on Olu's shoulder. I'm not going to die, he said, and neither are you. Not today. He walked back to the drifter to wait. 3 hours later, the Shikari shuttle docked at Bay 12. 3 new hunters stepped onto the station. They were young, eager, and hungry for blood. Riss met them at the airlock. She looked at their bright amber eyes and their freshly sharpened claws and their arrogant, predatory confidence, and she felt something she could not name. Something like worry. The cargo bay of Way Station Howland 9 was the largest open space on the station. It stretched 200 feet across, filled with stacked shipping containers, loading cranes, magnetic cargo arms, and coils of rigging cable hanging from overhead tracks. The ceiling was high enough that the lights up there looked like distant stars. The floor was scarred metal, dented and scratched from years of heavy freight being dragged across it. Danny walked into the cargo bay alone. He had left Bina on the drifter with the engines warm and the docking clamps on quick release. She had not been happy about it. She had used several words that Danny was fairly sure did not exist in any official language. But she had let him go because after 10 years of flying together, she trusted his instincts even when she thought those instincts were completely broken. The bay was cold. The environmental systems down here ran at minimum power to save energy for the upper levels. Danny could see his breath in small white clouds. He walked to the center of the bay and stopped. He put his hands at his sides. He waited. They came from 4 directions. Gal came from the left, sliding between 2 shipping containers like oil through a crack. He was the biggest of the 3 new hunters, broad across the shoulders, his scales so dark they looked like a hole cut into the air. Senna came from the right, fast and low, her body close to the ground in a sprinting crouch that covered distance with terrifying speed. Tor dropped from above, landing on top of a container stack with a metallic boom, his amber eyes bright with excitement. Riss came last. She walked out of the shadows behind Danny, slow and measured, and stopped 20 feet from him. She was the pack leader. The others would follow her signals. Commander Drea watched from the Fong of Silence through a camera feed patched into the station's security system. Her face was unreadable. The 4 Shikari formed a circle around Danny, 40 feet across, close enough to charge, far enough to let the prey think it had room to run. It was textbook pack formation. The prey would bolt in one direction. The hunter on that side would drive it back toward the center. The others would close in. The circle would tighten. The prey would exhaust itself in panic. Then it would end. Gal began the subvocal clicking that coordinated the pack. Low, rhythmic pulses that Danny could feel more than hear, vibrating in his teeth and his ribs. Senna answered with her own clicks. Tor joined in. The sound built into a pattern that was almost musical, a hunting song that had driven 1,000 species to madness with fear. Danny stood in the center of it all. He took a slow breath. He let it out. He smiled. Gal charged first. He was the youngest and the most eager, and he came in fast from the left with his claws extended in a roar that bounced off the container walls like thunder. Danny did not run from him. He did not fight him. He simply stepped to the side at the last moment, pivoting his body like a door swinging open, and Gal blew past him and crashed into a stack of cargo crates. Senna came next, low and fast from the right. Danny watched her approach, read the angle of her body, and stepped backward into the gap between two loading cranes. Senna shot through the space where he had been standing and had to dig her claws into the floor to stop herself from slamming into the far wall. Tor leaped from his container stack, dropping straight down toward Danny with all four claws extended. Danny took 3 calm steps forward, and Tor landed on empty metal with an impact that dented the floor plates. By the time the hunter looked up, Danny was already 10 feet away, standing between 2 cargo arms with his hands still at his sides. He was not running. He was moving the way water moves around rocks. Smooth, effortless, without urgency. Every step was precise, every pivot calculated, every position chosen because it put something solid between him and the nearest hunter. He used the cargo bay like he had built it himself, ducking under crane arms, stepping around cable coils, putting containers at his back so they could only come at him from the front. The pack's coordination fell apart in minutes. The subvocal clicking became erratic. Gal was snarling in frustration, charging again and again, hitting containers and equipment instead of his target. Senna was circling but could not find an angle because Danny kept repositioning into spaces too narrow for her sprinting approach. Tor tried another aerial attack and tangled himself in a web of rigging cable that Danny had walked beneath without touching. Their instincts were failing them. Every predator program in their biology was designed for prey that panicked, prey that ran in straight lines, prey that made noise and left chemical fear trails and moved in predictable patterns driven by terror. Danny was doing none of those things. His movements were calm and deliberate, and his body was not producing the fear chemicals that the Shikari used to track their targets. He was afraid, his heart was hammering, his adrenaline was spiking, but his training had turned that fear into fuel instead of poison. He moved better because of it, not worse. The hunters began snapping at each other. Gal snarled at Senna for cutting across his path. Tor, still pulling cable off his legs, roared at both of them. The pack discipline dissolved into individual frustration. 3 apex predators, each one capable of killing anything on this station, were tripping over each other trying to catch one small human who would not stop smiling. Riss had not moved. She stood where she had started, 20 feet from the center, and watched. She watched Danny flow through the cargo bay like he belonged there. She watched him redirect the hunters without touching them, without threatening them, without showing a single moment of aggression. He was not winning a fight. He was making the fight impossible. And she understood. This was what made humans different. Not strength, not speed, not weapons or technology. It was this, the ability to take fear, the thing that destroyed every other species, and turn it into something else. Something calm, something precise, something that made them better instead of worse. Danny stopped moving. The 3 hunters were scattered across the bay, panting, frustrated, confused. He stood in the center of the open space, exactly where he had started. He looked at Riss, not at the others, just at her. He smiled, and Riss, standing in the cold of the cargo bay with her claws at her sides and her neck ridges flat, felt the corners of her mouth pulled back in an expression that no Shikari had made in the memory of her species. She smiled back. On the Fong of silence, Commander Drea watched the feed in silence. Then she reached forward and cut the connection. "Recall the pack," she said to the empty room. Her voice was very quiet. "We are done here." The cargo bay emptied slowly. Gal left first, limping slightly from where he had slammed into the container stack. He did not look at Danny. He did not look at anyone. He walked out with his head low and his tail dragging on the floor, and something in his posture said that he would not be talking about this hunt when he got back to the cruiser. Senna followed, her body still coiled tight with unspent energy, her clicks sharp and angry. Tor was last, still pulling a strand of rigging cable from around his ankle, his amber eyes burning with a humiliation that would take days to fade. Riss watched them go. She stood in the cargo bay doorway for a long time after they had left, her 4 eyes fixed on the human who was still standing in the center of the bay, still breathing steadily, still wearing that impossible smile. She walked toward him. Danny watched her approach. She moved differently now, The predatory role was still there, built in her body by millions of years of evolution, but the aggression was gone. She moved the way someone moves when they are approaching something they do not understand and have decided, for the first time, that not understanding might be acceptable. She stopped 6 feet from him. Close enough to touch. Close enough to kill. She did neither. Why, she said. One word. Her voice was low and rough, stripped of the ritual formality she had used before. This was not the huntress speaking. This was Riss. Why what? Why did you never fear me? Danny looked at her. He looked at the 4 amber eyes, the black scales, the claws that could open him from throat to hip in a single swipe. He looked at a creature that had been built by nature and culture to be the most terrifying thing in any room she entered. I did fear you, he said. Riss tilted her head. You did not show it. No, I did not. But that is not the same as not feeling it. He paused, choosing his words carefully. On Earth, where I come from, we grew up surrounded by predators. Lions, tigers, wolves, bears. Things with teeth and claws that were bigger and faster than us in every way. We were soft, slow. We had no armor, no venom, no natural weapons worth mentioning. By every measure, we should have been prey. But you were not. No, because we learned something that changed everything. We learned that fear does not have to control you. That you can feel your heart pounding and your hands shaking and still choose what to do next. We did not stop being afraid. We stopped letting fear make our choices for us. Riss was silent. Her tail hung still behind her. There's a thing we used to do, Danny continued. Thousands of years ago, when the predators came at night, when we could hear them growling in the dark outside our shelters, we did not run. We built a fire. We sat around it. We looked out into the darkness where the eyes were watching us, and we stayed. Not because we were not scared. We were terrified, but we stayed because we had each other and because running in the dark was worse than facing what was out there together. He looked at her. That is what I did with you. I looked at the predator. I felt the fear, and I chose to smile instead of run. Because on Earth, showing your teeth does not always mean you want to fight. Sometimes it means you want to be friends. Riss stood very still for a very long time. The cargo bay was quiet around them. Somewhere in the distance, the station's recyclers hummed their endless mechanical song. In Shikari culture, she said slowly, everything is predator or prey. There are no other words, no other categories. You are one or the other, and that decides everything about how the world treats you and how you treat the world. That sounds lonely. The word hit her like something physical. She blinked all 4 eyes at once. What are you then? She asked. If you're not predator and not prey, what word do you use? Danny thought about it. He thought about Earth, about the fires and the darkness, and the thousands of years of learning to live alongside things that could kill you. He thought about the way humans built fences not just to keep predators out, but to keep livestock in, the way they tamed wolves into dogs, the way they planted gardens at the edge of the wilderness and dared the wild to take them. Neighbor, he said. Riss repeated the word silently, her mouth forming around the unfamiliar shape of it. She did not understand it. Not yet, but she held on to it the way you hold onto a stone you found on a beach. Not because you know what it is worth, but because something about it made you want to keep it. I will remember that word, she said. Danny nodded. He held out his hand. Riss looked at it. She did not know what the gesture meant, but she understood the intention behind it. She extended her clawed hand and let him take it. His fingers were warm. Hers were cold. They stood like that for a moment, predator and prey, and something else entirely, connected by a bridge that neither of them had known could exist. Then Danny let go, picked up his bag, and walked out of the cargo bay. Bina had the drifter's engines running when he climbed aboard. She looked at him, saw that he was alive and uninjured, and said nothing. Some things did not need words. She released the docking clamps, fired the thrusters, and guided the ship out of Way Station Hallen, 9 into the open black. Olu watched the drifter pull away from the observation window near the docking registry. The small Pelani pressed his 3-fingered hand against the glass and felt something bloom in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. It took him a moment to recognize it. Hope. On the Fong of Silence, Commander Drea stood at the command console and waited for Riss's report. The huntress entered the bridge and stopped at attention, her scales still carrying the cold of the station's cargo bay. Your assessment of the human species, Dreas said. Final report. Riss looked at her commander. She thought about Danny standing in the flickering light of the maintenance corridor, smiling at something that should have killed him. She thought about the way he moved through the cargo bay, turning fear into water and flowing around every attack without a single moment of hatred or cruelty. She thought about his hand, warm against her cold claws. Do not hunt them, Riss said. Drea's eyes narrowed. Because they are dangerous? They're dangerous. But that is not why. Riss paused. Do not hunt them because they will make you question why you hunt at all. Drea stared at her for a long moment. Then she dismissed her with a wave of her clawed hand. Riss walked to the nearest viewport and stood there alone. The stars stretched out in every direction, cold and endless. Somewhere out there, a small cargo ship was flying toward its next delivery, crewed by a man who had smiled at a predator and a woman who loved him enough to keep the engines warm. Riss thought about the word, neighbor. She still did not fully understand it. But standing there in the dark, looking out at the same stars the human was flying through, she felt the corners of her mouth pull back again. She smiled. And for the first time in her life, the darkness outside the viewport did not feel like a hunting ground. It felt like a neighborhood,